In a conflict as fierce as the Pacific theater of World War II, many ships entered into battle, only to not come out the other side. Sometimes these were the second, third, or even higher number of battles. Sometimes it was their first major battle. There were even cases where a ship could be commissioned in the same year that she was sunk. A famous example of this would be USS Laffey. Not the museum ship famous for taking her licks and giving them right back, but the first Laffey. A Benson-class destroyer, this Laffey is only less famous than her successor, because that successor has her own tale of heroism, and of course, survival against the odds. The first Laffey, meanwhile, rests alongside the likes of Taffy 3 for reckless charge into danger against Japanese capital ships. Though, at least in this case, it might not have been as intentional a charge. In any case, USS Laffey, DD-459, was laid down on January 13th, 1941. This, a year before the Pacific War kicked off, puts her as one of the last pre-war American destroyers. Her launch at the end of October would put her in the fitting out stage when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in December. With war now engulfing the country, Laffey was rushed through her sea trials, coming out of those in March 1942. When she entered proper service then, she was a fairly typical Benson, with the caveat that she had less weaponry than initially designed. She carried 4 instead of 5 of the 5-inch .38 caliber gun, for example. These were joined, since this was early in the war, by a single quad 1.1-inch anti-aircraft mount and 5 20mm cannon, along with various machine guns. 5 21-inch torpedo tubes rounded out her surface action weaponry, which is only half as many torpedoes as the class was designed with, since the Benson originally carried 2 quintuple launchers. Laffey and many of her sisters would ditch one of the 2 mounts for more light anti-aircraft weaponry, hence only having 5 torpedoes. With that out of the way, Laffey didn't take long to see excitement in her service. A few months after entering service, she would join the frontline forces on August 28, 1942. And less than a month after that, she was serving with WASP when that unfortunate carrier was torpedoed on September 15th. Laffey would pick up survivors and bring them to safety before heading right back into action again. While the sinking of WASP would very technically be her first taste of enemy action, Laffey's first real battle came in the Battle of Cape Esperance on October 11th. Here she would begin her habit of picking fights with ships much larger than herself. Laffey, with other American destroyers, was in the front of the American formation when the battle began. Here she would open fire on the Japanese flagship alongside most of the other American ships. This fire would cripple the cruiser and mortally wound the Japanese commander, though the cruiser would ultimately escape to live another day. For her part, Laffey escaped unscathed from the battle, which allowed her to stay around the Solomons. There she would remain for the next month, escorting convoys and generally doing the usual destroyer kind of duties. At least until November 13th. After escorting a landing operation, Laffey joined up with an American formation to guard against Japanese incursions. This would end up being her last action. Once more at the head of the American formation with her fellow destroyers, Laffey would open fire on the Japanese when their force came into view. Specifically, she joined other Americans in firing on the unfortunate destroyer Akatsuki when that ship illuminated USS Atlanta with her searchlights. The Japanese destroyer quickly learned the error of her ways, while Laffey looked for another target. She wouldn't have to look long. It is here, in the darkness of night and in a battle best described as a close-quarters brawl, Laffey came upon the much larger Hiei. The Japanese battleship, or battlecruiser depending on who you ask, was sailing straight at the destroyer. In the chaos of the night battle, it is entirely likely that neither ship knew the other was there until Hiei came blundering out of the darkness right at Laffey. This is why I do make a distinction in comparison to Taffy 3, who knew full well what they were getting into. In any case, intentionally or not, Laffey and Hiei were coming right up on each other. The destroyer's captain quickly swung his ship around, coming as close as a bare 20 feet, 6 meters for the metric audience, to the Japanese warship. At this range, Hiei couldn't even remotely lower her main battery enough to hit the destroyer. Even her secondary guns couldn't really get an angle on Laffey. For her part, Laffey did not have this issue. Every gun she had available fired on the Japanese behemoth, raking her superstructure with hundreds of rounds. This set fires all across Hiei's superstructure, while killing or wounding most of her bridge crew including the Japanese admiral in charge of the battle group. Unfortunately, while I've seen reference to Laffey firing her torpedoes as well, the range was so close they couldn't even arm before they were slamming into the side of the Japanese warship. Regardless, the destroyer continued to fire on Hiei, even as she pulled away to the Japanese ship's stern. When Hiei vanished into the chaos of the battle, Laffey sped away, once more hunting for a new target. Unfortunately for her, she would find it in the form of a group of Japanese destroyers. Sources disagree on how many exactly, from as many as 4 to as few as 2. Regardless, Laffey was outnumbered and surrounded as she fought back to the best of her ability. Her guns blazed away, even as the Japanese ships pounded her into the dirt. 5-inch gunfire from the enemy raked Laffey, setting fires aboard her this time, as well as wrecking her hull and disabling her guns. This alone would probably have been enough to sink her, in spite of the valiant efforts of her crew to fight back. When a 14-inch shell from either Hiei or Kirishima, in the chaos of the battle it's really hard to say which with absolute certainty, hit her as well, that also caused severe damage. A follow-on hit by a Japanese long-lance torpedo is what sealed her fate, though. It hit her in the stern, blowing off both her propellers and part of her rudder. Afire and unable to control her movement, Laffey was doomed. Her captain, William Hank, ordered the ship abandoned. Unfortunately, the fires would spread to her magazines, setting off a massive explosion that broke her back. 59 of her crew, Hank included, would die in that battle, with the wounded reaching 116. For reference, Laffey's crew was 247 men. For her actions in that battle, Laffey was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation, while Commander Hank would posthumously receive the Navy Cross. For all that Laffey had a short career, not many destroyers can say they came within 20 feet of colliding with an enemy capital ship, only to open fire without a care in the world. That spirit certainly lived on with her successor, though that's a story for another day. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you in the next one.